vaguely remember something about Whitehall. So I think that's probably where I went. And it was a huge assembly of war correspondents, all sorts of David Halton, Leonard W. Brockington, so on, and Charlie Beddoe.
I first heard about Charlie Beddoe when my dad sent me an article from the Ottawa Citizen about a Royal Canadian Navy Combat Cameraman during World War II. Working here at Library and Archives Canada, I've been researching Canadian military photographers ever since I viewed my first Canadian Army newsreel.
Sergeant cameramen of the Canadian Army Film Unit shoot the stories for its production. On far-flung Canadian battle lines, they graphically record history in the making. Soldiers, specially trained in the camera art, they travel with forward troops to be on the spot to record the action.
While reading the article, I recalled seeing that name before. So I went into our database and noted that Charles Beddoe had several credits as a cameraman. His name appears in 18 different films produced by the Department of Agriculture Biographic Unit and the National Film Board of Canada. But what really caught my attention was his military service and involvement on D-Day. So I went back into the database and that's when I saw it. His name was attached to a film entitled D-Day Beaches. I had wondered if I had found Charles's D-Day footage. So I decided to pay Mr. Beddoe a visit at the Perley Rideau Health Center to see if the footage I had discovered was his. So let's just look at it.
It's black and white though. So it's not, if it's black and white, it's not my footage. But it was color. There's 16mm color on D-Day. That's disappointing. That's not my stuff.
Yeah.
It's definitely somebody on the beach that's landed. So it's got to be in one of the Army chaps.
So I was pretty crushed when he told me he had never landed on D-Day, and that at the time he was shooting color, not black and white footage.
I never landed on D-Day. I was 500 yards off the beach, and I took movies in color. But I only had a single standard lens. I wish I'd had a modern telephoto. I could have got so much more.
I thought it was strange that his name was attached to the film record, but then Charlie told me about some films he had sitting in his basement at his old residence. So I decided to meet with his son, William, to look at his father's belongings, which had been moved into storage.
That's Dad. That's his father and his sister Pat. She was in the Wrens. Great shot there. Those pictures. Lots of things we're finding, going through the basement at Mom and Dad's house. Treasures that I never knew were there. Pictures from the war. I picture him as a very young photographer there.
Sorting through the box of films, I separated the home movies from the material shot during his war years. One roll in particular stood out. It was a small roll of color film, the same type of film that Charlie had described using on D-Day. Not sure what to expect, I started to go through the roll, and no sooner had I started that I had to stop and saw in full color footage of Charlie and a colleague in full naval uniform posing with their 35mm motion picture film camera.
I'm sure that's Bob Hubnall. He was an officer movie camera. So there's the kind of camera we were using. I'm here. That's me. That's me. It is I.
And you don't recall this?
I don't recall this whatsoever. No, the David would start, it'd be 1941.
You're thinking this is probably aboard the David?
And on the David, yeah. Probably. That was a nice ship to be aboard, I really enjoyed it.
Let's see the photo at the end of it there. I did a freeze grab. Oh, it's a key.
Oh yes. Had my own cabin.
Did you?
Yeah. See, not bad for a seaman to have his own cabin.
I'll say. After watching this footage with Charlie and seeing him posing on deck aboard the HMCS David in 1941, it came to me that I'd also seen Charlie in the D-Day Beaches material that I had screened for him. The same material that our database indicated as Beddoe footage. So I compared the two images, and sure enough, there was Charlie. One of him on the David and the other of him on Omaha Beach.
And I went back to England, and I got a new assignment on a Canadian landing craft. I can't remember which one it was or who the skipper was now, but we took some American troops to the Cherbourg area, Omaha Beach, and there we landed. We actually landed and let the Americans off. Years later, my wife and I took tours in Europe, and we took one small tour of France that took us to an American cemetery as part of the tour. And I think it was that beach where I'd gone, because the pathway at the end of the cemetery looked like the path as I remember it when I saw those lads going up. So it gave me a sad feeling when I saw all those white crosses behind.
Charlie also had a roll of black and white footage that matched an account he related to me of him being outside Carpiquet Airport, just outside of Caen.
I went with some officers back to France, and I got to the outskirts of Carpiquet Airport outside Caen, and I came to a Canadian Army gun emplacement, and they were quiet. They weren't firing at the time. I said, "How much further can I go?" "Oh," they said, "you can go as far as you like, but we wouldn't advise it." And just then there was a pile of stuff landed just ahead. So I went back, and they captured Caen that day. And the next day I walked into Caen. And I think I'm very lucky to have walked alone and walked into Caen. I just had one thing happen as I was walking along. This old lady suddenly brushed out at me, and I didn't know what was happening. She gave me a big hug and saying, "Un libérateur." I don't know how I did it all then. When you're young, you do things that you wonder how you got. I mean, I was just walking all by myself. In fact, there was a high command car stopped and said, "Perley, sir, what are you doing here?" And I said, "I've come to photograph. Going into Caen to take some movies and to meet up with the Army film unit." I didn't even know they were there. That was a pure excuse, and I did meet them. It all did turned out exactly as I told them so.
Amazing as that was, I had yet another roll of his I was eager to show him. It was footage of the surrender of a German sub in Norway by Canadian naval personnel. And like the other rolls, I'm pretty sure there's a shot of Charlie. In the footage, there's a shot of a sailor offering a piece of chocolate to a little girl, and I think it might be Charlie. I'm wondering if that's not a bracelet you would wear, right? You never wore a bracelet?
Yes, I did.
Did you? On your right arm?
Probably, because I'm left-handed. I wore a little silver bracelet.
Does any of this look familiar?
But I'm not sure now. I know I did go on braid.
This is from your films in the basement. Your roles.
I don't remember these at all. I'm afraid I don't remember.
Because I remember the story you were talking about visiting the submarine pens. And here we have 60mm footage of a submarine pen in Norway. And it looks like they came aboard.
I know we had a boarding party on a German.
Was it at dock?
Yes.
It looked like that. And that was that roll. So the bracelet, you're not certain that was you handing candy to the little girl? And then there was footage of the Germans from a sub, which is...
It was such a confusing time.
Yeah. Of all the stories Charlie had to tell, his tale of the Athabascan is the most tragic.
Hector Lemieux and I went out on the Athabascan, and then other officers, Jack Connor and what was his name? Fred Warren, I think, came down. Warren was a writer and Connor was a photographer. They came down and we decided amongst us, the four of us, there shouldn't be too many eggs in one basket. So Lemieux and I voluntarily went to the Haida. We went out that night, and sadly that's the night the Athabascan sank. And the two other lads lost their lives that night. And I'm still here. And they went out, action stations was piped, and then all of a sudden, Athabascan fired a star shell. And whoops, we saw two German destroyers. They were close, they weren't that far away. The firing started, and it's a terrific assault on the ears. The battle had started, and then soon the Germans had started shooting. I could see a small fire on the Athabascan, but it didn't seem to amount to much. And then suddenly, the Athabascan blew up. De Wolf ordered the engine room to make black smoke. We couldn't do much, slow films. We get a few shots or star shells. It was a kind of a useless risk to go out on that kind of operation to try and take movies. We took movies of survivors that we picked up, leaving the ship. And that wasn't the sort of stuff we liked doing.
When Charlie mentioned filming survivors from the Athabascan, I went back into our database and ran a search. What I got back was an entry entitled Athabascan Sailors on the Rescue Ship Haida. Unfortunately, I never had the chance to screen the roll for Charlie. I called up the roll of film and was surprised by what I saw. Winding through the film, I saw these words written in red wax pencil marker. HMCS Haida lands survivors of HMCS Athabascan, Devonport, April 30th, 1944. And then a name, Beddoe.
This was one of the greatest losses the Canadian Navy had during the war. As far as a single ship, it was the most expensive ship, and expensive in lives. And there were so many ships lost, small corvettes and so on. But this was a big, important ship. It was a hard thing to take. Apart from all the lives lost. big ships have a bigger crew. I don't know what else to say about this. I still feel sad. But I go to the War Museum and see the model of the Athabascan, which I did the other day.
As I was sitting down at home editing this video, it happened again. I saw Charlie's face looking back at me. Right at the very start of the roll, he is standing amongst the other sailors in a black toque, his face dirty with smoke. It was Charlie. There are only a few frames, but I am certain it is him. He raises his hand and approaches the camera to continue filming survivors.
Well, I felt it was quite important at that time because, unlike today, where we take for granted all the pictures and all the news shots, and everybody's got a cell phone and they grab, this particular news happening. And in those days, you didn't have TV. You had to go to a newsreel theater to see them. So they were rather special and unusual.
And how do you feel that you participated in that?
Well, I was at least shooting people without a gun. I was trying to show people, other people, what was happening. That's, what else could you say? I had no great grandiose plans in my mind. I was thrilled when I saw the story of Antwerp and saw footages I'd taken. I was thrilled when I saw a story on naval war artists. It was probably pretty simple stuff, not too fancy. But at that time, it was something that was worth looking at.